I am Dylan, 32 years old, and my story begins on the worst day of my life, the day I buried my son. Before I tell you about the courtroom battle that exposed my entire family, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The rain was cold. It wasn't a dramatic downpour, just a miserable, persistent drizzle that soaked through my black suit jacket and chilled me to the bone. Felt fitting. The world had turned gray and cold the moment my 9-year-old son, Leo, took his last breath, and it seemed only right that the sky should mourn with me. But I was the only one mourning. I stood by the small, freshly dug grave, watching the casket being lowered into the earth. It was so small, too small. A gut-wrenching, physical ache ripped through me, and I had to bite down on my own lip to keep from crying out. Beside me, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, held a large black umbrella over my head. She hadn't said a word, just squeezed my arm when I arrived, a silent pillar of support in a sea of emptiness. I looked around the cemetery. The green hills were dotted with headstones, but the chairs set out for my family were empty. All of them. My mother, my father, my brother. Not a single one had shown up to say goodbye to their grandson, their nephew. The silence was deafening, broken only by the patter of the rain and the quiet words of the priest I could barely hear. I was utterly, completely alone. After the service, what little of it there was, I drove home to a house that felt cavernous and silent. Every corner held a memory of Leo, his Lego creations still on the coffee table, his favorite superhero blanket draped over the sofa. The quiet was a physical weight, pressing down on me. I collapsed onto the couch, pulling out my phone for a meaningless distraction, a way to numb the agony for just a few seconds. And that's when I saw it. A notification from a cousin I rarely spoke to. She had tagged my brother, Ethan, in a photo on Instagram. I clicked on it, my thumb moving on autopilot. The image that loaded felt like a punch to the gut. It was my family. My mother, Helen, beaming in a tasteful pearl necklace. My father, Richard, looking proud, a glass of champagne in his hand. And my younger brother, Ethan, the golden child, standing with his arm around his smiling fiancée, Sophia. They were at the Grand Horizon Hotel, in a lavishly decorated ballroom, celebrating their engagement party. The caption read, "To the happy couple. So glad the whole family could be here to celebrate." The whole family. While I was burying my son, they were toasting a wedding. My hand tightened around the phone, the plastic creaking under the pressure. My throat closed up. A wave of nausea and white-hot rage washed over me. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. My heart leaped for a second, a stupid, hopeful flicker. Maybe she was apologizing. Maybe there was a reason. I opened it. Her words were cold and clinical. "We need to talk. Bring the trust documents with you tomorrow. Don't be dramatic, Dylan. This is urgent." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. The trust. My late wife, Isabella, had set up an $850,000 trust fund for Leo's future. The documents. Urgency. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening clarity. This wasn't just neglect. It was a calculated move. And right then, I knew the funeral was only the beginning of the nightmare. That was the moment the grief in my heart began to curdle into something else entirely. Something harder. Something that was ready to fight. Before I could face them, I had to understand how we got here. Driving to my parents' house the next day felt like driving through a fog of memories. Each one a small cut. A tiny piece of the puzzle that explained the empty chairs at my son's funeral. It always came back to Ethan. I remembered my 10th birthday. I had begged for a party at the local laser tag arena. My dad had grumbled about the cost, the waste of money on something so frivolous. In the end, I got a sheet cake from the grocery store and a new pair of sneakers. 2 months later, for Ethan's 8th birthday, my parents rented out the entire city aquarium. They hired a magician and had a custom-made cake shaped like a shark. I remember standing in the corner, watching Ethan open a mountain of presents, and feeling a familiar, hollow ache. When I asked my mom why his party was so much bigger, she just patted my head and said, "Ethan's just different, dear. He needs a bit more encouragement." That was the line I heard my whole life. Ethan needed more. More attention, more praise, more money. When I made the varsity soccer team in high school, my dad told me to focus on my grades. When Ethan joined the drama club and landed a minor role, my parents bought a full-page ad in the local paper congratulating him. I worked a part-time job all through high school to save up for a beat-up old Honda. They bought Ethan a brand new Mustang for his 17th birthday because he'd had a tough semester. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never caused trouble. And in my family, that made me invisible. Ethan was the charming one, the risk-taker, the one who always had a grand plan that required a bailout from Dad's wallet. He was the investment. I was the utility bill you paid without thinking about it. I tried to talk to my mom about it once when I was in college. I called home, excited because I'd gotten an A on a difficult physics midterm. Before I could even finish my sentence, she cut me off. "That's nice, honey. Listen, your brother is having a little trouble. He needs some help with his rent this month. Your father and I were thinking you could dip into your student loan money." I remember the phone feeling heavy in my hand. "Mom, that's my college fund. I need that for tuition." "Don't be selfish, Dylan," she'd said, her voice turning sharp. "Family helps family. Ethan has so much potential. We can't let him get discouraged." That was my family's mantra. Don't let Ethan get discouraged. My own struggles, my own successes, they were all secondary to the grand project of propping up my brother. They weren't bad people, not in the way you see in movies. They were just blind. Blinded by their adoration for their golden child, and I was just a shadow he cast. I had accepted it for the most part. I had built my own life, found my own happiness. But I never realized how deep that blindness went, or how cruel it could become, until I had a son of my own. A son they never truly saw either. The best parts of my life began and ended with Isabella. I met her in my last year of college. She was brilliant, funny, and saw me in a way no one else ever had. She didn't see the forgotten older brother or the reliable, boring son. She saw me. She saw my ambition, my quiet strength, my deep capacity for love. With her, I wasn't a shadow. I was the sun. She never understood my family. Early in our relationship, we went to my parents for Thanksgiving. I spent most of the day helping my mom in the kitchen while Ethan sat on the couch with my dad, loudly discussing some new, half-baked startup idea he had. At dinner, my father praised Ethan's entrepreneurial spirit. No one asked me about my new promotion at the engineering firm, a promotion I had worked tirelessly for. Later that night, back in our apartment, Isabella turned to me, her brow furrowed. "They don't see you, do they?" she asked softly. It wasn't an accusation, just a sad observation. "I'm used to it," I shrugged. "Well, you shouldn't be," she said, taking my hand. "I see you, and you're incredible." She was the one who encouraged me to break away, to rely on myself instead of seeking their approval. We got married, bought a small house, and 2 years later, Leo was born. Holding my son for the first time was like feeling a part of my own heart start beating outside my chest. He had my eyes and Isabella's brilliant, infectious smile. He was perfect. He was our entire world. My family's reaction was lukewarm. They sent a gift basket. They visited once in the hospital. But they were always distracted. Their conversations always circling back to Ethan's latest drama. It was Isabella who insisted on setting up the trust fund. She had a small inheritance from her grandmother, and combined with our savings, it became a substantial amount. I remember questioning it at the time. Is this really necessary? We can just save for his college fund. She looked at me with a seriousness that startled me. It's necessary, Dylan, she said. This is for Leo. It's protected. No one can touch it. It's to make sure he always has a choice, no matter what happens. She paused, and her eyes held a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. It's to keep him safe, especially from people who might not have his best interests at heart. I didn't understand the full weight of her words then. I just thought she was being a wonderfully protective mother. Then she got sick. The cancer came on fast and aggressively. Our world, once so bright, shrank to the sterile white walls of a hospital room. 2 years after her diagnosis, She was gone. My sun had set, and I was left in the dark, with only the small, bright star of my son to guide me. Leo became my everything, my reason for breathing, my purpose, and I swore on Isabella's grave that I would spend the rest of my life protecting him, just as she had wanted. I just never imagined that the people I would have to protect him from were my own family. The first sign that something was wrong with Leo was the bruising. Small, unexplainable bruises that bloomed on his arms and legs. Then came the exhaustion. My energetic, soccer-loving boy was suddenly too tired to play. After weeks of tests, the diagnosis came down like a death sentence. A rare, aggressive blood disorder. The next 8 months were a blur of hospitals, chemotherapy, and sleepless nights. I quit my job without a second thought. My entire existence revolved around Leo's needs. I learned how to administer his medication, how to flush his PICC line, how to read the monitors by his bed. I became an expert in his disease, spending hours online researching clinical trials, alternative therapies, anything that might give us a sliver of hope. My family's presence was fleeting. My mother would call once a week. Her conversations were always the same. "How is he?" she'd ask, and before I could answer, she'd launch into a monologue about Ethan. "Ethan's so stressed, Dylan. His new business venture is really taking a toll. And Sophia's parents are putting so much pressure on them about the wedding." One afternoon, Leo was having a particularly bad day. He was weak, nauseous from the chemo. My father called. "Dylan, your mother and I are thinking of going to Florida for a few weeks. The stress of all this, it's a lot. We need a break." I gripped the phone, staring at my pale, sleeping child. "A break? Dad, he's really sick. We know, son, and our hearts are breaking for you. We'll pray for him every day," he said, as if that was a substitute for being there. "Just try to stay positive. Ethan says you sound very negative on the phone. That kind of energy isn't good for Leo." They went to Florida. They sent postcards. Ethan visited once. He walked into the hospital room, looking uncomfortable in his designer jeans, and stayed for 10 minutes. He gave Leo a video game that was too advanced for him and spent most of the time texting on his phone. "Tough break, little man," he said as he was leaving, ruffling Leo's thinning hair. Then he turned to me. "Look, I know this is rough, but you've got to let people help. Mom and Dad are worried you're isolating yourself." He left before I could even respond. The only constant support came from my neighbor. Mrs. Gable, a widow in her 70s, was a quiet angel. She brought over home-cooked meals I rarely touched. She sat with Leo so I could shower, and she never once offered empty platitudes. She just showed up. She would sit and read to him, her voice a soft, calming presence in the sterile room. She saw my exhaustion, my fear, my desperation. She was more of a family to me in those 8 months than my own blood had been in 32 years. The day Leo died, I was holding his hand. His breathing grew shallow, and he looked at me, his eyes wide. "I'm tired, Daddy," he whispered. I told him it was okay to rest. I told him I loved him more than all the stars in the sky. And then he was gone. The memories faded as I pulled up to my parents' driveway. The fog in my mind cleared, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They hadn't been there for his life. They had skipped his death. Now they wanted to claim the one thing he had left. Over my dead body. The front door opened before I even knocked. My mother stood there, her face arranged in an expression of practiced sympathy. "Dylan, darling, thank you for coming. We were so worried." It was a lie, the first of many. I stepped inside. The air was thick with tension. My father was sitting in his usual armchair, looking stern. Ethan and his fiancée, Sophia, were on the sofa, holding hands. It was an ambush, a perfectly staged intervention. "Have a seat, son," my father said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. It felt less like an invitation and more like an order. I remained standing. "I'm not staying long." Mom's text said this was urgent. My mother, Helen, placed a hand on my arm. Her touch felt like ice. "We know this is a difficult time. We're all grieving. The words almost made me laugh. Grieving? They were grieving at a champagne party? I pulled my arm away. What is this about? My father, Richard, leaned forward, his voice low and authoritative. It's about the trust fund, Dylan. The inheritance your wife left for Leo. It's not an inheritance, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. It was Leo's future, his college fund, his start in life. And now that he's gone, my father continued, ignoring me, that money needs to be managed properly. You're not in a state to be making sound financial decisions. You're emotional. You just quit your job. You're unstable. Every word was a calculated blow, designed to undermine and belittle me. Ethan, who had been silent until now, spoke up. He's right, bro. We're just trying to look out for you. We can handle the investments, make sure the money grows. You can't be trusted with that kind of cash right now. Sophia nodded in agreement, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. We just want what's best for the family. My mother glided over to the coffee table and picked up a stack of papers. She held them out to me. Your father had his lawyer draw these up. It just transfers the management of the fund to us. It's a simple legal matter. It will protect you from yourself. Protect me. They were using the language of care to execute a heist. I looked at the papers. My hands were trembling, not with grief, but with a rage so pure it felt like a physical force. No, I said. My father's face hardened. What did you say? I said no. I'm not signing anything. Don't be a fool, Dylan, he snapped. You've always been impulsive. Remember that little bookstore you wanted to open after college? If I hadn't talked you out of it, you would have been bankrupt in a year. You don't have the head for this. It was their favorite story. The time I'd had a dream, and they'd crushed it with their practicality, framing it as saving me from myself. This is different, I said, my jaw tight. This is Leo's. It belongs to him, and now it belongs to his memory. The memory doesn't need $850,000. Ethan muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. That was it. The mask had slipped. I looked at their faces. My mother's feigned concern, my father's domineering anger, my brother's greedy impatience. They didn't see a grieving father. They saw an obstacle, a problem standing between them and a pot of gold. And they were ready to do whatever it took to remove me. As the argument escalated, my father's voice rising in frustration, my eyes drifted to a set of rolled-up blueprints on the corner of the dining table. They were held together by a rubber band, but one corner had come loose, revealing a detailed architectural drawing. It was for a new house, a massive one. While my mother was launching into a new line of attack, talking about how my grief was clouding my judgment, I walked over and picked them up. What's this? I asked, my voice flat. Ethan shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Oh, that's nothing. Just some ideas Sophia and I were kicking around. I slipped the rubber band off. The blueprints unfurled across the table. It wasn't just some ideas. It was a complete architectural plan for a luxury home. I scanned the details and my stomach churned. The master suite with spa bathroom. The 3-car garage with workshop. The home theater. Then I saw the budget annotations scrawled in the margins. Kitchen remodel St. $200,000. Landscaping and infinity pool with waterfall St. $150,000. Smart home integration St. $50,000. The numbers were staggering. This wasn't a house. It was a resort, a monument to their greed. I looked up, my eyes locking with Ethan's. Kicking around some ideas? This looks pretty serious. How are you planning to afford all this, Ethan? I thought your startup was still struggling to find investors. Sophia, his fiancée, spoke for the first time, her voice dripping with entitlement. Robert's, my father's, business is having some temporary cash flow issues. We might have to postpone the wedding if things don't turn around soon. It would be a terrible shame. The implication was as subtle as a sledgehammer. They weren't just planning a house. They were planning a whole lifestyle, a wedding, a financial bailout, all on the back of my dead son. So this is what it's about, I said, the blueprints rattling in my trembling hands. This is why you were at a party while I was at a funeral. You were celebrating your new windfall. Don't be so dramatic, my father boomed. The money is just sitting there. It's better to put it to good use, to build something for the family's future, than to let you squander it on God knows what. I was going to start a foundation, I said, the idea coming to me in that instant, a flicker of light in the darkness. A charity, in Leo's name, to help other kids, other families going through what we went through. They stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. Ethan actually laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. A charity? Oh, come on, Dylan. You can't be serious. That's the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard. You'd just be throwing the money away. Throwing it away. Helping dying children was throwing money away, but a $200,000 kitchen was a sound investment. The absurdity, the sheer, breathtaking selfishness of it solidified something inside me. The last vestiges of doubt, of filial obligation, burned away, leaving only a cold, hard certainty. This was a war, and I had just seen the battle plans of the enemy. I rolled the blueprints back up with deliberate, steady hands. The shaking had stopped. The rage had coalesced into a calm, icy resolve. I placed them back on the table. I'm not signing, I said again. My voice was different now. It wasn't pleading or angry. It was final. My father stood up, his face purple with rage. He was used to getting his way, used to me backing down. You listen to me, boy. You will sign those papers. If you force my hand, I will take you to court. We will sue for custody of that fund. We will tell the judge you're mentally unstable, that your grief has made you incompetent. We will drag your name through the mud. Do you understand me? The threat hung in the air, thick and poisonous. They were threatening to use my love for my son, my pain at his loss, as a weapon against me. It was the cruelest thing I had ever heard. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye. Then I guess I'll see you in court. I turned and looked at each of them. My mother, her face pale, her manipulative mask finally cracking. Sophia, looking horrified that her dream house was slipping away. And Ethan, he just looked petulant, like a child who had been denied his favorite toy. You'll regret this, Dylan, Ethan said, his voice a low snarl. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said, turning toward the door. You're not a family. You're a board of directors, and you just tried to liquidate my son's memory. The family I had died with him. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. The cold air felt clean, fresh. It was the first breath of freedom I'd taken in my entire life. As I sat in my car, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a terrifying clarity. They were going to do exactly what they said. They were going to try and destroy me. My hand hovered over my phone. I thought of Isabella. I thought of her fierce, protective love. I remembered her mentioning her old family lawyer, a man she trusted implicitly. He's like a bulldog, she'd once said. But he's our bulldog. His name was Arthur Vance. I scrolled through my contacts until I found his number, saved years ago and forgotten until now. My thumb pressed the call button. It was time to find my own bulldog. The war was on, and I wasn't going to fight it alone. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice for Leo. It was about honoring the one person who had always believed in me. It was for Isabella, and I would not let her down. Arthur Vance's office was the opposite of my parents' home. It was old, filled with mahogany bookshelves and the smell of leather and paper. Felt solid, permanent. Mr. Vance himself was a man in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He listened patiently as I recounted the entire story, from the funeral to the confrontation over the blueprints. I didn't hold anything back. I laid out all the ugliness, the years of being overlooked, the final, unforgivable betrayal. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, steepling his fingers. Dylan, he said, his voice calm and steady. First, let me offer my deepest condolences for the loss of your son. I remember when Isabella first came to me to set up this trust. She was so clear, so determined. She called it Leo's Fortress. Leo's fortress. The name sent a warm pang through my chest. That was my Isabella. She built that fortress well, Arthur continued. The language in this trust is ironclad. It explicitly names you as the sole trustee and subsequent beneficiary in the event of Leo's passing. It contains clauses specifically designed to prevent contestation from extended family members. She foresaw this, Dylan. Maybe not the exact circumstances, but she knew she needed to protect you both. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. So they can't win? Their lawsuit is just a threat. It's a bullying tactic, Arthur confirmed, designed to intimidate you into submission. They have no legal leg to stand on regarding the trust itself. So, he leaned forward, his eyes sharpening. They will attack you personally. They will try to prove you are an unfit custodian of the funds. That is their only path. He paused, then slid a folder across the desk toward me. Which brings me to this. I wasn't sure when or if I should show this to you, but now I think you need to see it. I opened the folder. It was a log of phone calls to his office. My eyes scanned the page and then they froze. My mother's name, Helen. She had called his office. Not once, but 5 times. I looked at the dates. The first call was 3 weeks before Leo died. The last one was 2 days before the funeral. She was trying to find a loophole, Arthur said softly. She inquired about the conditions of the trust, the process for challenging a trustee, the definitions of incapacitation. My paralegal flagged it as unusual and brought it to my attention. We gave her no information, of course. But the intent, Dylan. The intent was there long before your son was gone. I stared at the call log, at the black and white proof of her premeditation. This wasn't a spontaneous act of greed born from opportunity. This was a plan. They had been circling like vultures while my son was still fighting for his life. The last bit of my heart that still held out hope for them. The tiny, foolish part that thought this was all some terrible misunderstanding, shriveled and died. It was replaced by something cold and hard as steel. They are going to paint a picture of you as an unstable, grieving father who can't be trusted, Arthur said, his voice bringing me back to the present. Our job is to paint a truer picture, the picture of a dedicated, loving father who sacrificed everything for his son. We fight their narrative with the truth. The strategy was simple but powerful. For the next 2 weeks, my life became a mission to document my truth. Arthur had me gather every piece of evidence I could find. I printed out text messages, the terse, infrequent check-ins from my parents, the long, detailed updates I sent that were often met with one-word replies. I found emails where I had begged them to come visit, only to be told they were too busy, or that it was too emotionally draining for them. The most powerful evidence came from an unexpected source. When I told Mrs. Gable what was happening, her kind face hardened with a quiet fury I'd never seen before. That's just wicked, she whispered. Then she went into her study and came back with a small, leather-bound journal. I started this when Leo got really sick, she explained, her voice thick with emotion. I just wanted to keep track, in case you ever needed to remember. I opened it. Her neat cursive filled every page. It was a log, a detailed, daily account of the last 8 months. June 12th. Dylan was up all night. Leo had a fever. I brought them soup. No sign of his family. July 3rd. Dylan's brother dropped by for 10 minutes. Seemed more interested in his phone. August 21st. Dylan hasn't left the hospital in a week. He looks like a ghost. I wish his parents would come give him a break. Page after page. It was a testament to my lonely vigil and their glaring absence. It was irrefutable. Meanwhile, their campaign against me had already begun. I got a call from a former colleague. Hey Dylan, weird question, he said, sounding awkward. Your dad called me. He was asking if you seemed erratic or depressed before you quit. It was really strange. They were poisoning the well, trying to build a case out of whispers and innuendo. They even contacted the hospital, trying to gain access to Leo's medical records. A compassionate administrator, Catherine Winters, flagged the request as suspicious and denied it, calling me to warn me. The battle lines were drawn. They had lies and manipulation. I had the truth. And I had a journal, written in the steady hand of a kind woman who had witnessed it all. The fight was coming, and for the first time I felt ready for it. A week before the court date, the doorbell rang. It was late, almost 11 at night. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was Ethan. I hesitated, my hand on the lock. My first instinct was to keep the door shut, to tell him to go away. But Arthur's voice echoed in my head. Let them talk. Desperate people make mistakes. I took a deep breath and opened the door. He looked different from the confident, arrogant brother I'd faced at my parents' house. He looked tired, and there was a nervous energy about him. Can I come in? He asked. You've got 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside. He walked into the living room, a space still filled with the ghost of my son, and looked around. Look, Dylan, he started. This has all gone too far. The lawyers, the court date. It's a mess. You're the one who started it, I said, my arms crossed. It doesn't have to be this way, he said, his voice taking on a placating tone. We can still sort this out. As a family, drop the lawsuit. We'll give you a portion of the money. Enough to set up your little charity, whatever. But the bulk of the fund needs to be managed by someone with a level head. Dad and I can handle it. I just stared at him. The sheer audacity of it. He was offering me a portion of my own son's legacy, as if it were his to give. The answer is no, Ethan. His face changed. The desperate attempt at charm vanished, replaced by the familiar sneer. All right, I tried to be the nice guy. You want to play it this way? Fine. But you need to understand what's coming. He took a step closer. We have people who will testify. Friends. Former colleagues. Even Chloe. Chloe. My best friend since college. The godmother to my son. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Chloe wouldn't do that. Chloe's in a tough spot, Ethan said with a cruel smile. She made some bad business decisions. Dad helped her out with a loan. She's very grateful. She's prepared to testify about your erratic behavior, your obsessive nature during Leo's illness, how you pushed everyone away. He was using my best friend against me. The betrayal was so profound it left me breathless. We will destroy you in that courtroom, Dylan, he hissed, his voice dropping to a whisper. We'll paint you as a broken man who can't be trusted with $1. Everyone will know how unstable you are. You think you deserve that money? You were always the screw-up, the disappointment. Isabella was too good for you, and you know it. This money is a fluke, a lucky break, and you are not going to keep it. I stood there, silent. My heart was pounding, but on the outside, I was calm. Because just before I'd opened the door, I'd remembered Arthur's advice. I had discreetly pressed the record button on my phone's voice memo app. It was sitting on the end table, right between us, capturing every single venomous word. You have 2 minutes left, I said, my voice steady. He stared at me, bewildered by my lack of reaction. He had expected me to yell, to break down. He didn't know I was no longer the man who backed down. You're a fool, he spat, turning to leave. You're choosing to be ruined. He slammed the door behind him. I walked over to my phone and pressed stop. I had him. The courtroom was cold and impersonal. My parents, Ethan, and Sophia sat at one table, looking solemn and concerned, a perfect picture of a worried family. I sat at the other with Arthur Vance, feeling a strange sense of calm. Their lawyer went first, calling my mother, Helen, to the stand. She wept, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, as she described her deep concern for my mental state. We were just so heartbroken to see our son pull away, to see him self-destruct, she sobbed. This isn't about the money. It's about protecting Dylan when he can't protect himself. It was a masterful performance. Next came Chloe, my best friend. She avoided my gaze as she took the stand. She spoke in a low, shaky voice about how I'd become obsessed and paranoid during Leo's illness, pushing away all offers of help. He wasn't himself, she concluded. He was unstable. Each word was a knife in my back. Then it was Arthur's turn. He started with Mrs. Gable. She walked to the stand, small but resolute, and read from her journal. For 20 minutes, she detailed my tireless care for Leo and my family's consistent, damning absence. The narrative of the concerned family began to crumble. Next, Arthur called Chloe back for cross-examination. He was gentle, almost kind. "Ms. Bennett, you stated that you received a loan from Mr. Richard Walker for your business. Is that correct?" Chloe paled. "Yes. And is it also correct that this loan was forgiven just last week, in exchange for your testimony here today?" Chloe looked at my parents, her eyes wide with panic. She began to stammer, to deny it, but Arthur pressed, presenting a bank statement showing the loan's closure. The pressure mounted. Suddenly, she broke. "They made me do it!" she cried, tears streaming down her face. "They said I had to pay it all back immediately if I didn't testify. I'm so sorry, Dylan. I'm so sorry." A shocked murmur went through the courtroom. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Marion Peabody, banged her gavel for order, her eyes fixed on my father. But Arthur wasn't done. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "My client's family has claimed he is unstable, that his grief makes him unfit. But the truth is, this plan was put in motion long before his son's passing." He presented the log of my mother's calls to his office. Then he turned to Ethan. "Mr. Walker, you recently visited my client at his home, correct? To offer him a deal?" Ethan blanched. I just went to see how he was." "Is that right?" Arthur said, pulling out a small digital recorder. "Because we have a recording of that conversation. A conversation where you admit to witness tampering, and where you state your family's true motive is, and I quote, that my client is a screw-up who doesn't deserve the money." He pressed play. Ethan's cruel, hissing voice filled the silent courtroom. My mother gasped. My father's face went from red to ashen gray. When the recording finished, Arthur let the silence hang in the air for a moment. "But the final witness, Your Honor, isn't here today. Yet she has the most important testimony of all." He motioned to an assistant who set up a projector screen. "This is a video will, left by Isabella Walker." Suddenly, my wife's face filled the screen. She looked beautiful, tired from her illness, but her eyes were clear and strong. She looked directly into the camera. "If you are watching this," she began, her voice filling the room, "it means I'm gone, and that something has gone terribly wrong. I created Leo's fortress for a reason. I have seen the way my husband's family operates. I have seen their greed and their manipulation. I knew that if anything ever happened to me, they would see Dylan's kindness as weakness, and they would try to take advantage of him and my son." She smiled, a sad, loving smile. "Dylan, my love, you are the kindest, strongest man I have ever known. You are the most wonderful father. Never let them make you doubt that. This money is for you and Leo. It is your protection, your future. It is a wall around you that they can never break down." The video ended. The courtroom was utterly silent. I was crying, silent tears streaming down my face. My family sat frozen, exposed, their lies stripped bare by the ghost of the woman they had underestimated. The truth had finally come out. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're amazing. Please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know you've been with me on this journey. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of my story. Judge Peabody took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She looked at my family, and for the first time I didn't see a judge. I saw a woman filled with utter contempt. "In my 15 years on the bench," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I have rarely witnessed such a calculated, cruel, and shameless attempt to exploit a man's grief for financial gain. This court is not just a tool for legal disputes. It is a place of justice. And what you have done is a perversion of that." She looked directly at my parents. "To use your own son's devastating loss as a weapon, to attempt to have him declared incompetent while you were simultaneously planning how to spend his child's inheritance. It is monstrous. The judgment was swift and brutal. She dismissed their petition with prejudice, meaning they could never file it again. She ordered them to pay all of my legal fees. And then she did something I hadn't expected. Furthermore, she announced, her voice like cracking ice, I am granting Mr. Walker a restraining order, effective immediately. You will not contact him, approach him, or communicate with him in any way for a period of 5 years. My mother let out a strangled gasp. My father just stared, his jaw slack. They had walked in here as the powerful saviors, and they were walking out as disgraced, legally barred antagonists. As we left the courtroom, my family was swarmed by a few local reporters who had gotten wind of the dramatic case. I walked past them, head held high. My mother tried to reach out to me, her face a mask of desperation. Dylan, please, she whispered. A bailiff stepped between us, reminding her of the judge's order. Her hand fell to her side. I saw in her eyes not remorse, but the fury of a thwarted schemer. Arthur clapped me on the shoulder as we reached the courthouse steps. Isabella would be proud, he said. I looked up at the sky, a clear, brilliant blue. For the first time since Leo died, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't happiness. It was something quieter, deeper. It was peace. The war was over. I hadn't just won a legal battle. I had reclaimed my own life, my own story. The power they had held over me for 3 decades was broken, shattered on the floor of that courtroom. A few days later, Chloe called me. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She apologized over and over, explaining the financial pressure she was under, the way my parents had manipulated her desperation. I listened quietly. The anger I had felt was gone, replaced by a weary sadness. I hear you, Chloe, I said when she was finished. And I understand why you did it. I do. But I don't know how I can ever trust you again. I can earn it back, she pleaded. I'll do anything. The thing is, I said, my voice gentle but firm, trust shouldn't have to be earned back between friends. You should just be there. What you did. You took my greatest pain and you used it to help them hurt me more. I forgive you. I truly do. But I can't have you in my life anymore. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever had to do, but I knew it was necessary. The old Dylan would have caved, desperate to keep a friend. The new Dylan understood that some wounds are too deep, and some boundaries are essential for survival. My final act was to write a letter. I didn't send it to my parents, but to their lawyer as per the restraining order. It was short and to the point. I will not be contesting the judge's order. For my own healing and peace of mind, this separation is necessary. All of Leo's belongings that are at your house will be picked up by a third party next week. Please do not attempt to contact me. The bridge between us is broken. Perhaps one day it can be rebuilt, but that day is not today, and the work will have to be done by you. I didn't write it out of spite. I wrote it for closure. It was me, formally severing the toxic cord that had bound me to them for my entire life. I was no longer their forgotten son, their backup plan, their obstacle. I was just Dylan, a father, a man who was finally painfully free. The silence that followed, the absence of their calls and their drama, was the most beautiful sound in the world. It was the sound of a new beginning. The year that followed was one of quiet rebuilding. The grief for Leo was a constant companion, but it slowly transformed. The sharp, stabbing pain softened into a gentle ache, a reminder of a love that was too big to be contained in just 9 short years. The $850,000 sat in the bank, untouched. It felt like sacred ground, and I knew I had to do something that would truly honor my son's spirit. The idea that had come to me in a moment of anger in my parents' living room began to take shape. I used a portion of the funds not to buy a new house or a fancy car, but as seed money to start a foundation. I called it Leo's Legacy. Its mission was simple: to provide practical and financial support for families of children with life-threatening illnesses. We wouldn't be searching for a cure. We would be helping people get through the day-to-day nightmare. We helped pay for things insurance didn't cover: hotel rooms near the hospital, gas cards for long commutes, grocery delivery, sibling childcare. The small, logistical burdens that become mountains when your child is dying. Arthur Vance graciously offered to handle the legal paperwork pro bono. And my first volunteer coordinator was, of course, Mrs. Gable. She turned her quiet support for me into a driving force for dozens of families, organizing meal trains and volunteer schedules with military precision. The foundation grew faster than I ever could have imagined. Local news stations ran stories about us. Donations started coming in. We were able to hire a small staff, including a dedicated patient advocate. I found a new purpose. My engineering background helped me build the organization structure to make it efficient and effective. Every family we helped, every bit of stress we could alleviate, felt like a victory. It was like I was channeling all the love I still had for Leo outward, into the world. One afternoon, about a year after the funeral, I was visiting the pediatric oncology wing where Leo had spent so much time. I was there to drop off some care packages from the foundation. A young woman stopped me in the hallway. "You're Dylan from Leo's Legacy, right?" she asked. "I am," I smiled. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, her eyes welling up. "My daughter Emma, she's 7. We live 3 hours away. I had to quit my job to be with her. We were about to lose our apartment. Your foundation, you covered our rent for 6 months. You saved us." She called her daughter over, a little girl with a bright scarf tied around her bald head. "Emma, this is the man I told you about. His son, Leo, is the angel who's helping us." The little girl gave me a shy smile. "Thank you for helping me get better," she said. In that moment, standing in the hallway that had once been the site of my deepest despair, I felt a profound sense of peace. My family had wanted to use Leo's money to build a monument to their own vanity. Instead, Leo's memory had become a lifeline for others. This was his legacy. Not a house with an infinity pool, but a ripple of kindness that would touch lives long after we were all gone. On the 2nd anniversary of Leo's death, I went to the cemetery. I had replaced the temporary marker with a beautiful headstone, engraved with a quote from his favorite book, "Even the smallest person can change the course of the future." As I was laying down a fresh bouquet of sunflowers, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, my heart tensing, and was shocked to see Ethan standing there. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, there were dark circles under his eyes, and he was wearing a simple jacket and jeans, a far cry from his usual designer clothes. He held a single, wilting rose in his hand. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice flat. There was no anger, just a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I wanted to say I was sorry," he stammered, looking not at me, but at Leo's grave. To him, he was silent for a long time. I didn't say anything. I just waited. "The wedding's off," he said finally. "Sophia left me. After the court case, her parents saw me as a bad investment. The money dried up. So did she." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Funny how that works." He took a shaky breath. "I've been going to therapy, Dylan, trying to figure out everything. Why I did what I did." "I think it was pretty clear," I said coldly. "You wanted the money." "Yes," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I did. But it was more than that. The therapist, he made me realize something. I think I was always jealous of you." I stared at him, bewildered. "Jealous? Of me? Ethan, you were the golden child. You had everything." "I had things," he corrected. "I had stuff. Cars, parties, bailouts. But I never had what you had. You built your own life. You had Isabella, who adored you for who you were, not what you could provide. You had Leo. You had a real family, a real love. I was just playing a part, the successful son, the one who was supposed to make it big. It was a prison, Dylan, a gilded cage built by Mom and Dad." He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic sadness. "When Leo died and there was all that money, all I could see was a way to keep the show going, to finally buy the life that would make them proud, that would make me feel like I wasn't a fraud. I didn't even see Leo, or you. I just saw the numbers." He placed his wilted rose at the base of the headstone. I was a monster. I know that. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. I truly am. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with my son. His confession didn't excuse anything. It didn't erase the pain, the betrayal, the empty chairs at the funeral. But it did something unexpected. It added a final, tragic chapter to the story. He wasn't just a villain. He was a victim of the same toxic system that had tried to crush me. And in his own way, he was just as broken as I had been. Last month, Leo's Legacy held its first annual fundraising gala. It wasn't a lavish affair, just a simple dinner in a rented community hall. The room was filled with the families we had helped, the nurses and doctors we worked with, the volunteers who gave their time so generously. I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. I saw Arthur Vance at a table near the front, beaming like a proud father. I saw Mrs. Gable, chatting animatedly with the mother of a little girl whose life we had helped save. I saw Catherine, the hospital administrator who had warned me, now a member of our foundation's board. I saw faces I recognized from the hospital, now smiling, their eyes filled with hope instead of fear. In that moment, I understood the most profound lesson of my entire journey. My blood relatives had tried to tear me down, to steal from my son, to declare me unfit. They were bound to me by biology, but they were not my family. My family was here in this room. They were the people who showed up, the ones who offered a hand not because of obligation, but because of compassion. The ones who saw my pain and didn't turn away, but stepped into it with me. Family isn't about blood. It's about love. It's about loyalty. It's about who stands beside you in the pouring rain when everyone else is drinking champagne somewhere warm and dry. I looked at the picture of Leo on the screen behind me, his smile as bright as the sun. He was gone, but he was more present than ever. His short life had created all of this. He had changed the course of the future. My journey has been a long and painful one, but it led me here. It taught me that from the deepest tragedy, you can build a legacy of hope. It taught me that your value isn't determined by the family you're born into, but by the person you choose to be. And it taught me that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up, no matter how many times you're knocked down, and fighting for what is right. You have to be your own advocate, your own fortress. My old family is a distant memory. I hear whispers now and then. My parents live a quiet life, their social standing tarnished. Ethan is trying to rebuild his life from scratch, without the safety net of their money. I don't wish them ill. I just don't think of them at all. My life is too full of love and purpose now to have room for that kind of poison. My son's legacy is safe, and so am I. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has touched you in some way. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Share your story in the comments below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.